I'm Rachel Dworkin of the Chemung County Historical Society. It is June 6th, 2020, and I am here interviewing.
Captain Anthony Alvernaz of the Elmira Police Department.
All right, and we are doing this for the COVID Memory Project. Captain Alvarez, how long have you been with the Elmira Police Department?
25 years.
Okay. How has COVID affected the department in terms of policies or staffing or health issues?
So currently, we are still in the phase of trying to keep everything disinfected, making sure officers are wearing their masks while in public. If they're speaking with individuals, we're trying to keep a distance, not going in people's homes if we don't need to, having them come out and speak with us. So we're using pretty much sanitary matters to try to control it. Prior to this phase, we had some more extreme measures in place, and they pretty much were changed on May 18th of this year to transition to this more just using caution, trying to, making sure people are washing their hands more often, just kind of like the self-discipline measures.
Okay, so what were the initial measures that were put in place?
So it took a little while for us to realize the gravity of the situation. But once we realized that this is something that everybody needed to take part of to kind of stop the spread, we had to come up with a way that we could still police the city, provide protective services, while also limiting the amount of exposure that our officers were having. And contrary to that, how many officers could have been having exposure to the civilians. So we didn't want our officers getting sick, and we didn't want to have our officers get other people sick. So there was some methods that we tested out. They seemed to work out well. Our very first thing was to limit the types of calls that an officer would respond to in person. Elmira, New York is one of the few police agencies probably in the nation that still send a in-person officer anytime somebody calls the police. No matter what the issue is, we respond. We started to limit those types of calls. So if a call was simply reporting a minor crime where there was no further interview to be done except speak with the victim or complainant, we would try to do that via phone. Let's say like a bike larceny or criminal mischief or something where there was no evidence to obtain. The officer, usually the desk officer or the officer from the safety of the patrol vehicle, would call the complainant, speak with them, ask the right questions to see if there was more follow-up required. If not, they would follow up in due time, following the safety precautions. So several calls for service were done that way, and they are still active today on the 10th.
Is that something that you're likely to continue on following COVID just because it's more efficient, or are you going to go back to the old way, or do you not know?
I do not know. However, I would be a proponent to say that we should start maybe dealing with it that way. I do understand that people like to actually have an officer show up to the residents when they make that call. It's a more community relation type positive image. We like to have the interactions with people, see faces and things like that. However, with this pandemic, we realized that some people were getting sick well after the contact was made. So we wouldn't even, if we can save that 2-week spread by simply just not being face to face with somebody, it's definitely something to consider. And there's plenty of police departments don't even respond to the types of calls that we respond to anymore. They call to a call center, and it's just kind of generates an automated report and logged and classified. So there's several things we can do. We do not want to lose the face-to-face with the people, but times are changing. We've also thought about possibly doing online reporting for certain things. There's I think what we have learned from an organization, same with most individuals in the community, is that there are different ways that can be done, different ways and methods that can be used to work remotely and still have a positive effect. But I think it's just navigating those and trying to figure it out and testing it. So no, we don't have an answer yet. We're still just following this previous protocol.
Okay, so you changed the way you responded to calls. Did you change patrol schedules, anything like that?
Yeah, so in addition to having the officers wear masks and practice safe social distancing, we also wanted to try to do our part to stagger, not only for our benefits. So one of the philosophies was we don't want to get ourselves sick. So officers on the same platoon that might have rotating days off could get sick at home, or they can get sick on the job, and every time they report to duty, they could be getting each other sick. So of course, just like around the nation, our briefings were modified. We weren't around a table in an enclosed room. We went outside in the parking lot, stood 6 feet apart. So that was the first thing. But then we started to modify our platoons, and we were instead of just guys having 2 days off, the officers would have a week off. So they had to figure out a way to stagger it. That started on April 6th. The very first step of that process was we denied all previously approved time off. So anybody that had any vacation days, paid holidays, comp days put in the books, they were denied it. So everybody had to show up to work in order to make it effective. We needed the staffing, the manpower to make it work. So everything was canceled. 3 members of each platoon, and we have 3 platoons: A platoon, B platoon, C platoon.
And how many officers total? And how many officers in each platoon? So
there are 14. Well, it varies because there's special shift that sometimes blend in. But the raw numbers, the basic for the patrol platoons, it's 14 officers and 3 supervisors per platoon.
And then, so that would be math. How many people is that total?
17 per shift.
17 per shift. Okay, and then how many officers are there overall in the department?
Well, it depends on what numbers you're looking at. I will say 76 as a conservative number at this point in time. Okay. I don't know right now.
Alrighty.
So, and that's our total numbers. We have people off on long-term injuries and things of that nature. So, okay. I just don't know the exact number right now.
Alrighty.
So we took 3 officers from each platoon and gave them an entire week off. That way the rotation would work for a 5-week rotation, trying to balance, the infection rate between officers and the public and officers and themselves.
Did you know if there are any officers who were infected?
As of this date, the 10th, we have not had any positive COVID results from officers. We did send out 4 officers to be tested because they had some type of symptoms or they had come in contact, whether at home or on the job, and all of those results came back negative.
So you are doing testing, or did you just test the officers who had symptoms, or is everybody getting tested?
No, we only did the officers that had symptoms or had recently come in contact with somebody that we knew had COVID.
Okay.
Right now, some local clinics have offered to test all first responders for free, and we have put that out to the officers, at their own discretion if they want to or not. We're not forcing them to. I had it done. I came back okay. Usually it's about a two week lag time at this point. So that option is there, but we have not forced every officer to go get tested.
Okay.
And that's just for the antibody test, not for the actual COVID.
So have you, were there any additional policies that were put in place?
Yes, the Detective Bureau moved to a work-at-home status, and that lasted for 2 months. We kept 1 officer in-house in case of emergencies and somebody needed to go right out on the scene. Everybody had their department cell phones. We had all calls forwarded from their desk phone to their cell phones. They had to have the radios on at all times, and that seemed to work fine. If we had to go out to a scene, we just simply use our proper precautions, social distancing and mask, and respond from home to the scene and then back at home. Trying to keep this office, the Detective Bureau, a sterile environment. The goal with that was the same as the patrol levels, to not get each other sick or the public sick, but also we wanted to have a standby location in the event we moved to a different strategy of actually separating platoons, so each platoon could have their own building as well. We never actually went that far, but we wanted to have that as an option.
Okay. Was there any other policy changes or precautions that were put in place?
No.
What about cleaning of vehicles? How often does that happen normally?
So, normally it doesn't happen very often at all, not as much as I would like them to. But that was yes, I apologize. There was several orders issued that officers would make sure that they would fully sanitize their vehicle before and after operation. So the outgoing officer would wipe everything down. The incoming officer wouldn't just take their word for it. They would also then wipe the vehicle down as well. For desks and workstations, those were continually wiped down after use. The keyboards, the mouse, the desk, the chair handles. A continuous Lysol spray, I guess, was occurring.
Okay. So, did you personally face any difficulties in terms of following those procedures, or did they work for you for the most part?
No, well, our own procedures work well. The problem was trying to mitigate with other agencies. As far as the Detective Bureau is involved, a lot of our caseload involves other police agencies, other social service divisions. I mean, there's plenty of different offices that we work with when we're doing our investigations. And one perfect example is I have a rape case where I was going to travel out of town to a New York State barracks and bring the victim in to look at a photo array, and I'm still not able to do that based on state police restrictions. But it'll happen. So, I mean, it was just more, I wouldn't say problematic. I would just say it's, you just had a little more patience, and you just had to be a little bit more diligent in what you're doing. It really was not that detrimental to doing the job.
So I know the courts are currently shut down. How has that created a backlog in terms of caseload and prisoners in city lockup or that sort of thing?
Well, due to the bail reform laws, there wasn't many arrestees awaiting for arraignments.
Okay.
Right before this, we started where we were unable to actually detain people that we should be detaining, so that kept a lot of the preliminary arraignment log low to begin with. The courts did put other stipulations in to considerations when we did have somebody that fell under the category of being able to be detained. They put several other laws that they were not willing to actually have them come into court. And so we had to add that to the list of those we could not detain. So what that did was we had to file warrants for several people. And I do know that this week we just had a flood of new warrants issued by the court. So yes, there definitely was a backlog, and they're mitigating through that now.
Have the courts returned to session?
No.
No? Okay.
The courts are still doing remote sessions. Our officers had to go onto the steps of the DA's office to have in-camera videos, court sessions, which seem to work okay. I'm actually hoping that this ordeal proves that remote arraignments and remote trial and hearing cases can be utilized through such technologies in the future. There are plenty of times where we have to have patrol officers travel great distances to pick somebody up from another jail, bring them to Elmira City Court for some type of hearing, and then drive them all the way back, and of course then come back. So some of these hearings are a burden for manpower and costly to the department. And if we've proven that this works, I'm hoping that technology is adapted for those types of things to help kind of keep our officers in the city of Elmira and not traveling all over New York.
Ah, okay. So you didn't have any prisoners currently in the jail? So you didn't have health concerns associated with that?
Oh no, I hope that. No, we did. There were several people that we did have locked up in Elmira City lockup, and we did have arraigned and did have to transport to the Chemung County Jail. Another tactic that we used was every time we did have in custody arrests, the Detective Bureau was assigned to follow up with those people for 2 weeks to see if they developed any type of COVID signs after the officers had contact with them.
Okay. And as far as you know, did any of them?
No.
No? Okay, good. So I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk about the protests following the wake of the death of George Floyd. So they've been happening pretty much continuously on the steps of the City Hall since then, with a rally as well on the June 5th. What has been the department's response to that? both in terms of policy and...
So initially, we were getting intelligence reports from law enforcement agencies in New York and across the nation that many of the peaceful protests actually had bad actors infiltrating them and causing disturbances, causing property damage, violence, attacking officers. So of course we were a little bit on edge. For the very first week that we had our own protesters on City Hall, the orders were to let them protest as long as it stays peaceful, not to interfere, not to try to give a police presence, but to let them have an open forum to do what they're doing as long as they're, being peaceful. And to this day, every protester that we had any type of dealing with on the front steps were 100% respectful, courteous, all positive. We had no issues. They would clean up after themselves each day. We wouldn't even find a cigarette butt or any type of paper or wrapper left. Very respectful. We still have had no issues with the protesters. We did realize that they were going to be doing a march on the 5th, and because of the intelligence from other agencies of all these other bad people trying to come in and infiltrate and wreak havoc, like Black Bloc and any anarchist group, Antifa, we did order our Detective Bureau personnel to be in uniform for a week in the event that there was some type of violence that needed to be addressed. Officers were ordered to double up in patrol vehicles for safety in case they were ambushed. And the safety message was just continually pushed out to our officers that there may be others out there that are looking to cause harm to officers. So, pretty much a high alert. We were, trying to make sure we had provided more security for our own officers' personal vehicles, asking officers to be aware of their surroundings coming and going to work.
But there haven't been any problems?
No problems.
So I noticed that there were police patrol vehicles blocking intersections to protect the marchers. Had they filed beforehand that for the march, and you were complying with that, or was it something that you guys took the initiative to block off streets for?
I'm not really sure when the city manager issued the permit for the march. I do know that our plans for the march and how we were going to provide proper security for the march started probably well before the permit was actually issued. We have been in negotiations with the managers of the march, fully cooperative. We did not receive any negative feedback to some of the ideas. Our main mission was to keep the protesters safe based on fears that we had from anti-protesters coming in from the intelligence we've been receiving from other agencies. So in most cases where there'd be like a march or a parade, we would use wooden barricades. They'd be set up prior, and that would keep traffic away. Our biggest fear, the one concern we had that was shared amongst the department, was the fear of a vehicle being used to attack and ram and run over protesters. So where we would usually have barricades, we replaced that with hardened targets, being the patrol vehicle and an officer. Security was extremely paramount to us in this, and I think we did a really good job with it. We brought in a lot of additional staff, not only from the Elmira Police Department, from the Chemung County Sheriffs and the New York State Police. And there was a lot of other officers around trying to keep an eye out for threats during the entire march.
But it went well. There were no issues that you are aware of?
No issues that I was aware of. I was proud of everyone that was involved, from the security detail and the protesters themselves. I think it was a perfect example of the way the system is supposed to work, where government works with the community.
And I understand they're doing another event on Juneteenth. Is that something that the police department is also going to be participating in security-wise?
We have not been asked to participate with that. I am not sure where the permit and insurance, what the status of the legal part of it is. It's from my understanding that there was some people from the other protest march that were unhappy with the police presence, were offended by it, and that they want this march to be vacant of any police presence.
Oh, okay then. So how has the department felt, or how have you felt about about what the movement wants, what the movement is?
I at one point I thought I understood what the movement wanted. I thought they wanted a voice. I thought they wanted government officials to open their eyes and ears and hear what has to be said, and understand that fundamental changes at all levels of government, including the police departments, need to change. There would be better training, a better understanding. Every agency can get better. I understand that the 4 officers in this particular incident that fueled this were fired and eventually all arrested. I thought that was showing that that justice was occurring, but riots continued, and stores were still burned and looted, and cops were still attacked. So at this point in time, I'm not quite sure what the end goal message is. I know that change is a very big one. I just don't know exactly. I don't know when the riots will stop. I'm not quite sure. It's hard to wrap my head around it. I really thought that once the officers were arrested, that would be a good sign, that people would say, okay, the justice system is working. They're not getting away with it. And I really thought the Elmira March, the first one, was just an exemplary sign that that things were working out, and groups were coming together, and everybody was having the same message. And the fact that people were not happy with the outcome of it, I guess I'm curious what outcome is desired at this point. From a police standpoint, to me, that was a big success, and I enjoyed participating in it. I was proud of the Elmira community, Chemung County as a whole, the organizers were great, and the people that marched in it were great. So I'm just curious. I'm at a loss, I guess. I'm hoping that dialogue picks up between the organization and well, at least Elmira city government, but I guess all levels of government. And I think there needs to be a strategy on exactly what it is, kind of negotiate. What is it that both sides are looking for? How can we bring peace back to the streets? Is there something that is there something that both entities desire that they can agree upon?
Okay. Does Elmira have a policy on chokeholds?
Yeah, we do not do chokeholds.
Okay. And that's been police policy for how long?
I can't speak to that.
Okay. Does Elmira Police Department have a policy on releasing complaints from the public about specific officers? Or so right now in the New York State legislature is working on a bill that would basically make it so that if an officer has a complaint against him, that can become a matter of public record. And right now, a lot of places throughout the state, it's only if it's brought up in court that becomes a. Does Elmira have a policy regarding that?
I can't. I don't know. I really don't know.
Okay.
I don't think it's ever been done. I don't know if we have a policy on it or not. I mean, I'm the public information officer, and I can't see time where I would ever release an officer's disciplinary record without being ordered to do so.
Okay.
And here's why.
Okay.
When I first came on the job 25 years ago, a grizzled old beat cop said, "Look, kid, if you're not getting complaints, you're not doing your job." So, and there's so much truth to that. There are times where officers will get complaints made against them to supervisors just simply because that person wasn't happy that somebody of authority was telling them what they need to do and they didn't agree with it. It doesn't have to be abusive. It doesn't have to be physical. It doesn't have to be, deadly physical force issues. So simply throwing out a number, how many times somebody had a complaint made against them, which is documented, I think it kind of can taint the color of what the public's perception is about that officer. I know I've received many complaints. One complaint I can speak to, which I'm guilty of, is I was talking with somebody who possibly had a knife on them, because we got called there for a man with a knife. And as I was talking to that person, another individual that had nothing to do with the interaction came by and says, "You can't be talking to him. I want your name." And I said, "I'm talking to this individual right now. You wait." He then wandered off and went to my captain and said the officer refused to give me his name, which I did. And I was found guilty of it because my attention was on a person that could have a knife, and that person was just interfering. So that's a complaint, and it was justified, and I was found guilty of it. Doesn't mean I'm going to go out and kill a citizen. So what if that happens 20 times and they say the officer had 20 complaints and they were all founded? So I don't believe that just simply releasing a numeric of how many complaints an officer has in their personnel file can truly paint a picture of the type of individual that everybody wants to judge.
Okay.
And right now I believe it's only done through court if the defense believes that it's something that could be related to the crime that the officer did, the judge will. Yeah, but no, I do not believe that simply releasing an officer's, unless you're going to release everything, unless you're going to, like in that case, if the entire scenario was pushed out at the same time for people to, and nor do I think releasing it will even solve anything anyways. If let's say an officer has a spotless record and they say the officer has never received any complaint, I don't think in this situation that would make any difference.
Okay. Do you have anything to add either about COVID or about the current protesting or about the proposed police reforms that are happening throughout the state and country?
I think as a community with the COVID, I think we have learned some basic ways that we can help keep the spread of any future illness from ravishing our communities. As children, we're reminded to wash our hands over and over and over again, and that's all well and good. But as adults, I don't think we're really pushed to. I think for those of us that followed the guidelines and recommendations, I think it was a great training tool for us, and hopefully we'll move into the future and any next major pandemic, we'll already reduce the rate of infection because hopefully we'll continue to wash our hands or be a little bit more knowledgeable about not having to be within 6 feet of somebody if we don't have to be. These simple little steps that we can take individually, I think, can help slow the spread of something in the future. So I think it was a horrible, horrible time for people, but it may help us in the future.
Okay.
As far as the current political climate, the police are the most visible entity on a daily basis for citizens about their government. So it's only natural that when there is some angst or concerns or even anger in the way that the citizens of whatever community feel that they're being treated or represented, of course, the officers are on the front lines and they may be the first to hear it. Our officers are trained to be professional, so they can't let words hurt them. After all, they swore an oath to uphold the Constitution, the First Amendment. Somebody's allowed to say whatever political, any belief that they have. However, that does not make it right for police officers to be intentionally hunted and assaulted and killed in the name of justice, because that's not justice. It's the exact opposite of justice. We live in a community that's supposed to be a civilized nation, really, the entire country, not just Elmira. And we can't let vigilantism overtake the safety and security of our communities. So I understand that defunding the police may be a knee-jerk reaction, but I would hate to live in a society where you couldn't call 911.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No.
All right. Well, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me.
Sure.